15 years in the armed forces taught me that some symbols carry meaning beyond just their physical form. The American flag flying in front of my house wasn't just a piece of cloth, it was an extension of my identity, a daily reminder of the oath I took to protect this country. That April morning, I noticed the corners were starting to fray. The red and white stripes had faded after years under Connecticut's sun and rain. Running my fingers over the worn fabric, I decided it was time to replace it. Following the protocol I learned in the military, I carefully folded the old flag while taking a new one out of the package. Maple Ridge Estates, where I bought my house 3 years after settling down as a structural engineer, was the kind of place you see in real estate brochures. Immaculate streets, perfectly trimmed lawns, and houses that looked like they jumped straight out of a home decor magazine. What the ads didn't mention was Susan Thompson, the HOA president, who ruled our community like it was her own little kingdom. Subscribe to the channel and leave a like to get more stories like this. I was finishing raising the new flag when I heard the unmistakable sound of high heels pounding on the concrete. Even before I turned around, I already knew who it was. "Mr. Wilson, what are you doing?" Susan Thompson was standing at the edge of my sidewalk, wearing an expensive linen outfit and clutching her signature clipboard. "Good morning, Susan." "Just replacing my flag. The old one was worn out." She adjusted her designer glasses and pursed her lips. "Did you fill out the form for modifying exterior elements? To change a flag? I didn't know that was required. Any visible alteration from the street needs prior approval. It's in the rules." She tapped her pen against the clipboard, her perfectly manicured fingers contrasting with her stern expression. "Susan, I swapped out a worn American flag for a new one. I didn't change its colors, size, or location. Rules are rules. No exceptions. I'll send you a formal notice later today." She turned on her heel and left just as she had arrived, leaving only the echo of her self-imposed authority behind. 3 days later, I found an envelope in my mailbox. It contained a $250 fine for unauthorized modification of exterior elements and a demand to remove the flag until the appropriate process was followed. I took a deep breath, trying to rein in my growing frustration. Clearly, Mrs. Thompson didn't know about my military background. I've never been one to abandon a mission halfway, especially not when I believed I was on the right side. I spent the night researching online and discovered that the 2005 Federal Flag Protection Act specifically limited how much homeowners associations could restrict the display of the American flag. At the next HOA committee meeting, I presented my defense. Susan, sitting at the head of the table like a queen on her throne, listened with evident disinterest. "Federal laws don't override our internal regulations, Mr. Wilson," she declared when I finished. "This community maintains an aesthetic standard that everyone agreed to when they bought their properties." The other committee members, all handpicked by Susan, nodded in unison, not daring to contradict her. "The fine stands, and the flag must be removed until proper approval is secured," she concluded, tapping her little wooden gavel as if closing a case at the Supreme Court. On my way home that night, the neighbors watched me discreetly. Some gave me sympathetic smiles. Mr. Harris, a retiree who lived 2 houses down, even nodded encouragingly. It was clear I wasn't the only one suffering under Susan's regime. The next morning, I got up early and went for a run, as usual. When I got back, I suddenly stopped in the middle of the sidewalk. The mast was empty. My flag had disappeared. I hurried inside and checked the recordings from the security camera I'd installed when I moved in, a habit I'd kept since Afghanistan. The footage left no doubt. At 6:15 in the morning, Susan Thompson entered my yard, removed my flag, and quickly left with it rolled up under her arm. My heart raced as I re-watched the scene over and over. It wasn't just about arbitrary rules anymore. It was theft, plain and simple. I grabbed the phone and dialed the local police station. "Maple Ridge Police Department," a calm voice answered on the other end. "I'd like to report a theft," I said, the determination growing in my voice. "And I've got it all recorded." Officer Jackson arrived right on time at 3 in the afternoon. Tall, standing straight with a notepad in hand, he reviewed the security footage without showing any emotion, merely nodding occasionally. "Mr. Wilson, these recordings clearly show Mrs. Thompson entering your property without permission and removing an item without consent," he said, closing his notepad. "This constitutes trespassing and theft. I'll be questioning her later today." "Thank you, officer," I replied. "That flag means a lot to me. I understand perfectly. My brother served in Iraq." He paused, his professionalism giving way briefly to empathy. "I'll find out what happened to your flag." 3 hours later, my phone rang. It was Officer Jackson, his voice now carrying a different tone. "Mr. Wilson, we have a situation more serious than we imagined," he said bluntly. "Mrs. Thompson didn't just confiscate your flag. Witnesses saw her burning it at the community park this morning." My stomach churned. "She burned my flag?" "Yes, sir. Mrs. Rodriguez was out walking her dog when she saw Mrs. Thompson lighting what looked like a small, improvised ritual. She took pictures, initially thinking it was some official flag retirement ceremony, but then recognized Mrs. Thompson from HOA meetings." I sank heavily into my kitchen chair, trying to process the news. Burning American flags isn't illegal. Ironically, it's a right protected by the same free speech I swore to defend. What bothered me wasn't the act itself, but the sheer disrespect, stealing personal property just to deliberately destroy it as an act of retaliation. "So, what's next?" I finally asked. "That depends on you, Mr. Wilson. We have enough evidence to charge Mrs. Thompson with trespassing, theft, and destruction of private property. In some states, disrespecting the national flag could even be considered a misdemeanor, although that area of law is pretty murky." "I want to press charges," I replied without hesitation. "It's not about the flag itself. It's about respect for other people's property and boundaries." "Understood. I'll start preparing the necessary documents and contact the prosecutor's office. In the meantime, I suggest you install more cameras and avoid any direct confrontation with Mrs. Thompson." After hanging up, I stared out the window at the empty mast. The symbolism wasn't lost on me. It was as if Susan had declared war on my most fundamental values. The very next morning, I began receiving messages from several neighbors. News of the police investigation had quickly spread throughout the community. The Millers, an elderly couple who had been fined last year for planting unauthorized sunflowers, shared their accounts of Susan's controlling behavior. The Anderson family, whose kids had been forbidden from building a small treehouse, told similar stories. Mr. Bennett, a businessman living on the main street, sent a detailed email describing how Susan had interfered with his backyard renovation, delaying it for months with arbitrary demands. Teacher Lauren Fisher admitted she was considering selling her house due to the constant harassment from the HOA president over her improperly vibrant curtains. It was like a dam had burst. Years of pent-up frustration were surfacing, with every message revealing a new chapter in Susan Thompson's reign of bureaucratic terror. 3 days later, Officer Jackson showed up at my door again, this time accompanied by a colleague. "Mr. Wilson, the prosecutor has decided to move forward with charges against Mrs. Thompson," he informed me. "We've secured witness statements that confirm a pattern of abusive behavior. The judge has issued a subpoena, and we're on our way to arrest her now." "Can I come with you?" I asked impulsively. Jackson hesitated. "It's not standard procedure, but since you're the victim and the primary witness, it might be useful to have you there for identification. However, I ask that you keep your distance and let us handle the approach." 20 minutes later, we parked near Susan's house, a 3-story imposing structure with Greek columns at the entrance, easily the most ostentatious in the neighborhood. Coincidentally, it was also the day of the annual property inspection, when appraisers visited the community to determine market values. Several neighbors, including Mr. Harris, the Anderson family, and the Millers, were discreetly watching from the opposite sidewalk, pretending to chat casually while shooting glances in our direction. Susan answered the door wearing a navy silk outfit and a look of discontent upon seeing the police. "Mrs. Thompson," Officer Jackson began, "we're here to formally charge you with trespassing, theft, and destruction of private property." "This is ridiculous," she retorted haughtily. "I'm the president of the Homeowners Association. I have the authority to remove items that violate our code." "Mrs. Thompson, your position in the HOA does not give you the right to enter private property without permission or seize or destroy personal belongings," explained Officer Palmer, Jackson's partner. "We have video evidence and witnesses confirming your actions." Susan's face paled for a moment before she quickly regained her mask of authority. "My lawyers will sort out this misunderstanding quickly. The HOA has clear statutes that—" "This isn't an HOA matter, Mrs. Thompson," Jackson interrupted, his voice firm yet professional. "These are criminal charges. According to this subpoena, you must appear in district court next Monday." Susan grabbed the papers as if they were contaminated, scanning the text quickly. "This is absurd. Who's behind this?" Her eyes locked with mine on the sidewalk. "You! This is a personal vendetta. Do you have any idea how much power I have in this community?" "Mrs. Thompson," Officer Palmer continued, "I need to let you know that your subsequent actions are also under investigation. We have witnesses confirming the deliberate destruction of the confiscated property in a public place." The silence that followed was broken only by the distant sound of a lawnmower. The real estate appraisers walking down the street stopped to watch, momentarily forgetting their clipboards. "This is outrageous," Susan finally replied, her voice trembling now. "The flag was violating our regulations. I was just doing my duty as—" "Mrs. Thompson," Officer Jackson cut her off again. "I must ask you to come with us to the station to give a formal statement. You can choose to come voluntarily now or wait while we obtain an arrest warrant, which would significantly complicate your situation." The atmosphere seemed charged. Neighbors who had been casually passing by now couldn't hide their interest. Mrs. Fisher had stopped, clutching her school books. Mr. Bennett peered from his home office window. It was as if the entire neighborhood was collectively holding its breath. Susan looked around, realizing for the first time that she was surrounded not only by law enforcement officers, but also by years of accumulated resentment. Her little empire of minor tyrannies was crumbling before her eyes. "I need to call my lawyer," she declared, trying to compose herself. "Certainly," replied Jackson. "You can do that from the station. Please grab your personal documents and come with us." As Susan briefly went back inside her house to fetch her purse and documents, I noticed a change in the street's atmosphere. There were no cheers or open displays of celebration, just a silent, palpable relief circulating among the residents. It was as if a long, inexplicable storm had finally started to clear. 15 minutes later, Susan emerged with her designer purse and her cell phone pressed to her ear, speaking rapidly with someone she claimed was her lawyer. As she walked to the police vehicle, her heel broke midway, causing her to stagger slightly. A small detail, but loaded with symbolism that didn't escape the onlookers. "This isn't over," she hissed as she passed me. "You have no idea who you're dealing with." "Actually, Susan," I replied calmly, "I think we all know exactly who we were dealing with, and that's why we're here." When the police car drove away, the neighbors began to approach slowly, like cautious survivors emerging after a natural disaster. "Did you really do it?" Mr. Harris murmured, a smile slowly spreading over his wrinkled face. "You really took her down." "You did the right thing," I answered. "Some rules matter more than others." Subscribe to the channel and leave a like to get more stories like this. In the following days, something subtle changed in Maple Ridge Estates. People started talking more, sharing stories about their experiences under Susan's rule. I discovered I wasn't the only veteran in the community. Mr. Harris had served in Vietnam, and Mrs. Rodriguez had 2 kids currently in the Air Force. The Anderson family finally built that treehouse for their kids. The Millers replanted their sunflowers. Mr. Bennett finished his backyard renovation. A week later, I received an unexpected package. Inside, neatly folded into a perfect triangle, was a new American flag accompanied by a card signed by almost every resident in the community. "To the man who reminded us of the true meaning of freedom at home," the message read. The next morning, I raised the new flag on the empty mast. As the red and white stripes danced gently in the spring breeze, neighbors quietly gathered around. Nobody spoke during the hoisting. It wasn't necessary. The symbolism went beyond words. Susan Thompson was formally charged with trespassing, theft, and property destruction. The court also considered a charge of disrespecting the national flag, though that issue sparked considerable debate over the limits of protected expression. Regardless of the final outcome of the trial, the damage to her reputation was done. She put her house on the market 2 weeks later and resigned as HOA president. At the next association meeting, I was surprised when several neighbors suggested my name for the interim committee to reorganize the community rules. Initially hesitant, I eventually agreed on one condition: that our very first official action be drafting a new set of guidelines that were more reasonable, starting with an explicit guarantee of the right to display the American flag on all properties. The proposal was unanimously approved. Sometimes I think back to that morning when I replaced the worn-out flag, never imagining the chain of events it would set off. It wasn't just about a piece of cloth or condo rules. It was about the principles that define us as a community. In the end, Susan Thompson's story served as a powerful reminder. Those who enforce rules tyrannically often forget that there are higher, more important laws governing them. And sometimes, even battles that seem trivial are worth fighting. The morning after the final court ruling, I woke to a familiar sound: the gentle rustling of dozens of flags in the wind. Looking out the window, I saw that nearly every house in Maple Ridge Estates had hoisted an American flag in their front yard. Big, small, new, or old, an ocean of red, white, and blue waving in unison. That's when I realized, what we defend at home is just as important as what we fight for on the battlefield. And sometimes, the courage needed for both isn't that different. Subscribe to the channel and leave a like to get more stories like this.